Am I audible? Thank you. PY はチャットにてお願いいたします。ちょっとボイスだとインタラプションが入ってしまうので、チャットしてくだされば、6分までには取ります。OK。よいしょ。Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Chair. We believe that from side government, purpose of the religion is to ensure the spiritual salvation and provide a safety net for the most vulnerable individual in the society, because the government is an imperfect actor and cannot provide every single safety and every single helps for every individual in the society. That's why the religion stands in the principle, but in the current status, the organization which have this hierarchical relationship inside the religion constitute a self-dignity of individual. That's why we are happy to prefer this world. So as Prime Minister, I'm going to bring you two constructive matters. Number one, how organized religion in the opposition paradigm constitute a self-dignity of the minority, which is the psychological security and the physical safety net. And secondly, on the counterfactual on our side of the house, how without the organized religion, individuals who have the enough accessibility and have the sense of security inside their own mindset. But before that simple clarification, what kind of the role we are going to support as a counterfactual from the government benches? So we are happy to oppose the religion who have the hierarchical relationship inside the religion, people who have the interrupted messages from the God, and people who receive that messages from the preacher or the Pope or an etc. That forms of the hierarchical relationship. We are happy to oppose that. Instead of that, we are going to support the world which have the individual community or the family or who have the neighborhood, who have the very small scales of the religion, who have the small scales of the beliefs, and which have the open religion in itself. That kind of the world we are going to support in the first place. So that is the exclusive difference from the government benches and opposition side. So onto the first issue about how on our side of in opposition's paradigm, religion assault dignity. We have the two main characters in today's debate. The first three about this sexual minority, and secondly is about the children. Onto the first issue about how the LGBT and the sexual minority are hugely assaulted under the organized religion. We have the mainly two reasons here. Number one, due to the centralization of the political connection and human resources, and also the financial capacity from the entire community in itself. People who have a lot of the community, not only the liberal, but also the conservative, and gather and unite together and they share their own value in itself. That's why as a natural consequences of that compromisation in itself, liberal and conservative value are hugely intertwined and deeply, how can I say, deeply interpreted through the history. That's why due to the process of the centralization and having the relationship of the hierarchy, the conservative value highly likely to remain inside the religion. And secondly, more importantly, intergenerational stabilization also immobilize the organic changes. We believe that the traditional value highly likely to prioritize because the religious preacher and executive highly likely to prioritize their own history and what the dogma in the Bible has said, but because from the avoiding the criticism from the other conservative and other religious believer in itself. That's why inside the religion, those immobilization of the relationship highly likely to happen. What is the impact in the first point? It's about the psychological damages against the sexual minority highly likely to be happen by labeling them as a betrayer to the God or a sin to the God. That forms of the criticism and rhetoric will be justified inside the religion in itself. And secondly, in terms of the children's cases, also for example, inside a Catholic, the child abuses will be done from the preacher and from the Pope in itself. Why it is quite difficult to solve and identify in the opposition's paradigm? We have two reasons here. Number one, due to the black box inside the religion, the Pope and also the preacher who have the hierarchical status can justify to hide their evidence that they commit the child abuse inside the religion, because they have the huge relationship between the other politician or the other third party, for example, the police organization in itself. That's why it is quite difficult for the police organization to intervene inside inside the religious structure. And secondly, it is quite difficult for the children who have the very immature and vulnerable actor to voice out their own assault and the suffering in itself, because they have the strong fear of being criticized from society and being persecuted from their own community in itself. That's why those physical, the potential harms of the physical assault highly likely to remain inside organized religion in itself. Impact of these two argumentation is quite simple. It's about that those people are quite difficult to opt out from that structural religion in itself. Those people have to withstand the organic changes for the long terms itself by waiting the 10 years or 20 years. Those minority inside the religion have to withstand the potential harms and potential damaging from the organized religion in itself. It is quite assaulting. So onto the second issue about how and the counterfactor on our side of the house, we can bring the much more security for that individual. We have mainly two reasons here. Number one, in terms of the accessibility to the spiritual salvation from what they want to believe from the bottom of the heart itself. Because very simply, on our side of the house, the number of the religion based on the small community are rapidly increased, and the number and the diversity will be secured in itself. That's why the children or the person who have the different ideology can unite each other by sharing their own experience and their own sharing the belief inside of their familiar relationship and also in the SNS community itself. That's why if the children feel that the sense of differences between their own parents or another neighborhood, they can search what they want to believe in the SNS, and they can find the better solution and a better spiritual salvation from it. And secondly, they can be free from any forms of the blaming and criticism itself. On our side of the house, we have the no organized religion. That is to say, it's about we on our side of the house know the central icon, that's what is the religion in the first place. We on our side of the house, those sense of the blaming will be disappeared. What do I mean by that? For example, the case about by voicing out, I believe the Christianity, or that I believe the Buddhism, it is also the voicing out and is coming out what they believe in itself. That's why they have the huge pressure and possibility from criticized from society and from the blamed. Your belief in itself is a wrong ideology or whatsoever. On our side of the house, those iconic names and the symbolization will be disappeared. That's why the person who have the different ideology can unite and share open experience and beliefs as much as possible. So what is a conclusion of this argumentation? Is about the person who have the different ideology will be salvated as much as possible. And if those people have some struggle, they can collectively solve their own based on their own idea. We are very proud to propose.
Okay, thank you very much for that speech. I would like to call upon Elo to give us their case within 7 minutes here.
POI はチャットでお願いします。すみません、あんま慣れてないんで見逃しちゃったら恐縮です。Thank you, Noble Chair. Any hardship is there in the human being's life. Yes. So, but the religious belief is a pillar and guideline of life. Even every hardship, people believe in the God and also that their life of the happiness and purpose. The absolute goal of today's government side is this: they need that spiritual service. But unfortunately, that the human being just personal belief is extremely weak and also certain extent extremely selfish, because it's hugely reliant on that intuition and also that's the feeling of the people. So on that occasion, we think that certain extent that's controlled by the hierarchy, also the top of the religious leader, is extremely important rather than sustain their religious belief. That's why we oppose the motion. I have two arguments. The first of all, that the why personal belief is that always weak and also certain sense that's selfish. Why it's inherently problematic for damage to that spiritual belief for the believers. The second of all, that why comparatively that organization is better for the protecting that spiritual service. Before moving on, 2 points of the response to what previous speaker has said. The first of all, that they can protect the sexual minority, etc. But that anyway, unfortunately, that still that many the country that regardless of religious belief or not, that the still the hate, the discrimination against the sexual minority exists. On that occasion, if the government side that admits that the existence of the religious community or to a certain extent that the neighbors and your family that unite in the spiritual idea, that harm that anyway happened. They didn't expect that. So why comparatively that the small types of that religion is better? The second of all, that the children is the safety of the children issue, etc. Again, that even if the organized religion, that still that majority of the case, the assault of that the crime is or the sexual crime, or including sexual crime, is that also the neighbor and also friend, the family of that the children. On that occasion, 聞こえてない。大丈夫です。聞こえてる。OK。すいません。OK だ。So, 待ってね。So, on that occasion, even regardless of the organized or not, anyway, that happened. So, move on to the first issue about why the personal religious belief is weak comparatively to the organized one. So, we think that if they are not the organized idea, the people do not praise to listen that the religious leader, rather that they believe in the personally that's making the doctrine and constructing their religious belief. So on that occasion, that belief and the doctrine, the hugely rely on that feeling and the intuition of the human being. On that occasion, that on that occasion, that like okay. so on that occasion, the hardship exists. They give up their belief and also sometimes the changing doctrine by three reasons why. First of all, that and the people experience that something contradicts with their doctrine. For example, if you believe in God, maybe the God save you, but still that's something. For example, that your family died, but also this hardship is happened that they think that maybe God's betray me or God don't love me. That's kind of feeling they get. The second of all, that the simple that also sick or the case of the poverty. The material hardship that exists. Sometimes they give up their belief because that even the God says that don't steal it, but the God making this situation or just for the saving the life, people cannot cannot control their animal human desire. So on that occasion, that they just simply give up their belief and also their doctrine. The last three that unacceptable tragedies happen. For example, as I would say that the family is died or that the war is happened. So on that occasion, that people that disappoint and also that quite dubious to the existence of the God or that love of the God. So on that occasion, that what happened that the two types of scenario. First of all, that simply they give up to the believing the God. There's no God in existence. On that occasion, that they're losing the pillar of life, even though it has existence. Simply, the life is hard, and also they think that there's no the help from the others. The second scenario is that they that changing the situation and also justify their feeling. For example, that for the getting the food, they justify that the cheating because that God making this the situation, which means that God justify that the cheating or the cheating person or etc. Or sometimes that they just justify that their simple intuition to the feeling, like in that if they feel certain that intuition to the hatred to the sexual minority, they justify that God also that God don't like that sexual minority. So that's why the sense of the hatred is justified. But because this is extreme personal one, so no one revises it, no one stops or no one that saves that changing the doctrine. It's rather significantly problematic. So on that occasion, two consequences. First of all, that simply they disappoint and also they cannot sustain their mental security. Also, sometimes that they have the hatred to the sexual minority. No one can change, and it's extremely difficult to stop it. So move on to the second issue, why organized one is comparatively better. So we think that what the uniqueness of the organized religion, the certain points. The first of all, that they have the habitat to get together in the church and talk this and talk fluently. The second one, that the financially it's also sustainable by the donation. Many number of that like the believers, the not only local level but also the global help the existence. So also the 3 points is also sympathize each other because of the just believing the same God. They open their feeling and also sometimes the heart safe. Sometimes they talk to each other. So on that occasion that people that the belief is sustainable. First of all, that if they the hardship existence, people think that maybe the God don't love me or that God don't exist. So maybe the priest or the top of the religious leader cannot say because of this, even the hardship, because your family is like, but the God still loves you, or but because of this this perception of the doctrine, still you can be saved by the God, etc. The second one, that's materially helped by that religious organization. Because that's by the donation, they give you the food or the money. They do not need to betray or disappoint to that God. Lastly, that even has it existed. Simply that's the religious believer also that sympathize and also that save them psychologically. That's why we oppose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that speech. I would like to call upon the EPM to continue their case within 7 minutes. Here.
プレイで飛ばしとくか。はい、もうマイクオンになってますよ。あ、カメラオフで。恥ずかしい。はい、Can you hear me?
大丈夫です。
はい、ありがとうございます。
もうちょっとだけマイクに近く行ってくれたらもっと聞こえます。はい、
今聞こえますか？
聞こえます。ありがとうございます。
はい、ありがとうございます。シルバーカップってつらいな。マイクオンだっちゅう。あ、そうだった。すいませんでした。Okay. I'm going to start my speech within 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go ahead. Thank you, Chair. 3 materials from Deputy Prime Minister. First, let me talk about the necessity to dismantle those kind of religious organizations in the counterfactual. 2, I'm going to talk about in order to protect minority as very pragmatically, which side is better. Lastly, finally, as a form of religion, which side is better. All issues including the response to the previous speaker. So first, let's talk about the necessity. Unique necessity to assuming the counterfactual. Previous speaker talked about how, regardless of organized religion, discrimination, oppression happen towards the minority. We don't deny those kind of logic itself. But what we have to talk about here is the tendency and likelihood itself. Because in the many cases, realistically, oppressive regime relates to organized religion relates and caused by, for example, those kind of organized religion and its discrimination. For example, in the case of Saudi Arabia or so forth, discrimination or harassment towards female exists. But because the reason is that those kind of Muslim exist, those kind of power of Muslims is extremely huge, right? Therefore, in the likelihood, for example, in the case of Uganda or so forth, actually, because there is a certain organized religion exist and influence the politics, right? Those kind of discrimination or those kind of registration exist. That's why when we consider realistic scenario in the counterfactual, drastically those kind of discrimination or those kind of minority oppression can decrease. This is the first uniqueness on our side of this. But secondly, more importantly, as my partner told you, we think organic change is extremely difficult, unfortunately, in the status quo. Because what we talked about is that as for the leaders, for example, Pope Francis or those kind of influential actor inside those kind of organized religion, actually, strategically, they cannot ignore conservative believers itself in order to secure own position. Therefore, even if small mitigation itself can happen for the minorities, actually, it cannot the full salvation. Therefore, for example, even the Pope Francis said existence of LGBT itself should be admitted. However, still, he said it's unfortunately sin for the God over so forces. In this occasion, minorities have to feel ignorance itself, difference from the majority itself. Therefore, we think uniqueness of organized religion always here on our side of this house. That's why we think assuming the counterfactual is uniquely necessary. This is the fundamental merit on our side of this house. Second, let's talk about more pragmatic merit. Previous speaker talked about how because there is organized religion in the opposition paradigm, for example, poverty alleviation, donating money can more likely to happen. But what we have to recognize here is that firstly, because the reason why organized religion do that in the status quo is that because organized religion exists, right? Because society expects that kind of role on the organized religion. Because you are religious organization, which means you have to save the vulnerable. Therefore, you have to do that. But in the counterfactual, social expectation have to change because there is no more organized religion, right? But still vulnerable, for example, poor
exist. Therefore, society needs the other actor to fulfill that kind of thing. For example, therefore, demand for the NGO arising are more likely to appear. Therefore, those kind of NGO, NPO to take care of poor or so forth, right? More likely to exist on our side of this house. Moreover, in this occasion, those kind of people, the target people can donate is also different because the status quo there is organized religion. But after taking this in the counterfactual, there is only, for example, no more organized religion. Therefore, they have to donate money for the NGO or NPOs which advertise or so forth. Therefore, allocating the food or, for example, giving the educational chance can be secured on our side of this house. Moreover, uniqueness of organized religion is here because inside organized religion, when they have a certain amount of money, they have to use for their own selves. For example, from the viewpoint of those kind of leaders or influential actor inside the religion, in order to keep their own authority, for example, they have to make their, for example, clothes more gorgeous, or for example, they use those kind of money for the events or so forth. This is empirically proven in the current situation, right? In order to enrich own position, own life itself, those kind of money are more likely to be used. In this occasion, when we consider those kind of quantity, we think our side is better. Moreover, we think the reason why our side is better is also third reason here is that in the case of the organized religion, in this occasion, even the organized religion gathers the money, those kinds of the target who can be saved is extremely limited because people who can be only sympathized, who can be have the similar idea to those kind of organized religion can be saved because this is the intention of the organized religion. But on our side of this house, as my partner told you in the counterfactual, those kind of religious value itself is diversified or personalized. Therefore, more and more those kind of each religion, each personalized religion has each purposes, which means compared to the status quo, those kind of people who can be saved, those kind of the religious idea, religious poverty alleviation or so forth, is also diversified. More people, more vulnerable can get the spotlight. Therefore, from the viewpoint of those kind of diversity and quantity of the money, we think we can save the more vulnerable, for example, poor people pragmatically. This is why counterfactual is much better. Lastly, finally, let's talk about as a form of religion, which is better. Previous speaker mainly talked about because we can gather the people's idea. There was, for example, sense of belonging which exists. Those kind of the power to believe something is strong or so forth. To rebuttal to the first, it's not exclusive at all because in the counterfactual there is no organized religion. Therefore, I agree people less likely to feel the sense of belonging on the religion itself. But actually, those kind of people can gain the same thing by the other field. For example, inside the company, for example, loyalty to the boss, or for example, sense of belonging to co-worker exists, or for example, in the private sphere, like this debate on the community, you can feel those kind of sense of belonging itself. And when you share, for example, those kind of similar value or those kind of interaction or so forth, actually you can cultivate your own sense of belonging. In this occasion, actually the relationship between your others, for example, co-workers or friends, are more likely to stronger on our side of discuss because in this occasion you can not depend upon those kind of religious organization, right? Therefore, for example, unfortunately, your family die, maybe your family, your friends, or your co-worker, your bosses take care of you much more compared to the status quo. Why it's not enough? This is a burden to put on the opposition bench. Secondly, more important, even if it's not exclusive one, we think it's not so important because the target who can save it on their side of this house is unfortunately limited. Why? Because first, in the case of the minority religion, because they are organized strong religion, as for the minority religion, it is unfortunately very oppressive. As for them, to feel confidence is extremely difficult, unfortunately. Secondly, even in the case of the majoritarian organized religion, as far as certain people do have the different ideology from the mainstream. For example, even in the case of the Muslim, but I think, for example, eating pork is something okay. Always those kind of people have to feel their own betrayal or sense of guilty itself on this point. Therefore, what we have to recognize here is that those kind of sense of belonging, those kind of quantity are extremely unmeasurable and very doubtful. But compared with that, as my partner told you, on the counterfactual, because those kind of religious idea itself is more personalized individual, which means what you believe personally is always good and respectful on our side of this house. Therefore, whatever you want to believe, for example, type A, dash A, or B dash or so forth, every single of those kind of religion can be respectful. In this occasion, regardless of your belief, your own self-confidence can be cultivated. Therefore, as a form of religion, our side is very proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that speech. I would like to call upon the yellow to continue their case within 7 minutes. Here.
あ、聞こえますか？あ、大丈夫ですね。大丈夫。違うやつね、たまに。あ、今、声聞こえてますか？
こえてます。
大丈夫です。はい。問いはチャットでお願いします。I'll talk about two issues in my speech. First, I'll talk about why the benefit of the religious salvation becomes uniquely sustainable on the opposition paradigm. Secondly, I'll talk about how our side can better deal with the side effects of religion. So firstly, we already told you the several unique nature of the organized religion. First, we believe that hierarchical structure that opening government claims is actually benefits of the religious beliefs, because the importance of religious belief that being absolute and also the undoubted and undeniable. We think that kind of hierarchy actually gives the word of the priest or like those people who hearing the voice of the God actually authority, gives authority to that kind of voice or that kind of narrative that they provide. We think this is extremely important because, as leader already described, the life is quite hardship. The people sometimes cannot believe their God. People sometimes cannot believe their future. That's why that kind of authority is important. They said they can form that kind of similar kind of community. It is more smaller scale, but we think this is more vulnerable. Because they, under their server house, probably like those kind of small community like these company sizes or like local community sizes going to be emerge. Probably these communities have the different ritual, probably different narrative, different understanding of how God was saying, or what is the recommendation of the word of the God, that kind of stuff. That's why in that kind of circumstances, once they happen to deny their own God because of the hardship, they cannot believe because other religious people actually believe different things, and also probably the other religious people try to convert you to different group of the religion by saying that your religion is wrong, or like you didn't like follow our side of the narrative, or our belief is more like correct, that kind of stuff. In that kind of moment, as long as since like that kind of number of the group is quite small, there's too many multiple types of religious narrative actually exist, it's quite unsustainable. Furthermore, this kind of small community is not likely to last long time because this is likely to extinct once, for example, their own children or like their like surroundings not believe that, right? Yeah, on the outside of the house, since the organized religion have that huge scale, like probably like not just like across the board of the country, that in that kind of moment, these kind of religious beliefs is more likely to sustainable. That kind of religious text actually prolongs for centuries. We think that kind of long history also gives the authority and also the undoubtedness or like absoluteness of the religion. We think this is extremely important, especially for religion. But secondly, organized religion uniquely do a large scale kind of ritual or like education wide or so forth. For example, uniquely organized religion gets a large scale of donation and establishing a religious school. Actually, that kind of religious school provide education, and from the childhood, these children can learn about the religious text. Also, they can do the ritual, that kind of thing. Experience actually establish the identity as a Christian or Muslim. We think that kind of identity or that kind of experience actually gives this strong, solid identity as a religious people. We think this is extremely important for a religion. And also, they can do so by sharing, for example, the establishing church and doing the ritual for every week. We think that kind of experience is important because human is a social animal. They are susceptible to the other people's eye. That's why having a large number of the people and believing same thing or like almost similar thing is quite important to believe this as a correct. But secondly, the God is invisible, right? There's not something that tangible actually in the God that spiritual being exists. That's why people want assurance. People need that assurance or that kind of stuff. That's why the people actually doing the ritual, people learn about the text, and people spread the religious narrative to the other people. So we think that kind of thing can be done on our side of the house, on a larger scale of more sustainable. We think it's important. But lastly, we say that the donation is more likely to happen. Then because since this is a large scale, that kind of much number of money is going to be flood. And this gives a much like larger scale of savior, for example, giving the shelter to the refugee camps or that kind of stuff. Those kind of good doing actually gives the religion authority or persuasiveness, because my God actually tangibly saved lives. That kind of narrative is also, it gives the God authority. We think it's quite important. They say, oh, NPO and NGO actually exist on their several house. But we think that non-religious NPO like donation is not exclusive, right? On our several house, we can have both of the secular NPO and also religious donations. So we think in terms of number outside is superior. But secondly, we think that the non-religious NGO like donation is likely to be unsustainable because people's attention to each social issue is quite fragile. Like people may, for example, they're sometimes interested in the refugee issue, or next time they may be interested in the other type of social issue, BLM or whatever, so forth. Those kind of things is quite unsustainable. On the other hand, as long as a pious believer actually exists, those kind of donation is likely to happen and start into creates a larger number of donation. We think it's quite beneficial. So, secondly, how do we use this side effect of religion? Now, we have several responses here. Firstly, we think that because the religious organization is a huge scale, the public scrutiny is uniquely work on us as a house. Because religious organization actually need donation or tax exemption status or like social integration to the local community. That's why that once, for example, they did the anti-social behavior such as the discrimination LGBT in the modern world, this is likely to be severely criticized. And that's actually lose the authority number of the believers or donations. That's why the religious organization uniquely have the more incentive to incorporate and being related to the secular culture. We as a secular society, we think that public scrutiny is likely to work. But secondly, the good of the religion is that the religion has a good quote, right? Such as, for example, Muslim in the religious text, they said, that gives the vulnerable to the things or like the being nice and loving the neighbor, or that kind of narrative actually written in the text. We think that if these religious organizations that kind of text, actually this is going to betrayal. So that's why the religious organization have the incentive to work in the way. But even if the religious organization work in the bad in some instances, we think that cannot be solved even worse on the other hand. Why? Because firstly, those kind of desire to subordinate other people, or like the bias or like the social disgust to the different people actually exist on both sides of the house. But under their side of the house, this kind of thing is less likely to face public scrutiny because small community is less likely to face a less scrutiny. And also the view of the understanding of religion or the understanding of sexuality or family value is more likely to skew in a limited way. They say, the people are able to seek other community by SNS or so, right? If they are able to seek other community, probably they can do so on the side of the house. But the characterization we are talking about in today's debate, that those people who are likely to be susceptible to the community they are born. In that kind of circumstance, for example, children cannot betray what their father said or that kind of stuff. In that kind of circumstances, it's quite unlikely that these people are likely to seek, able to seek the other communities they are going to be safe. So we think, given that those kind of human desire is not going to change on both sides of the house, but under their side of the house, these people are likely to have a other, for example, excuse to subordinate people, right? Such as a patriarchal value, or like, for example, children have to obey the parents, or like the women have to obey the men. That kind of narrative is still exists on their side of the house and less likely to face public scrutiny and also the adjustment by the social expectation. We think this is far worse than our paradigm. That's what we propose.
Okay, thank you very much for that speech. I would like to call upon MG to start the opening half of this debate within 7 minutes here.
Can I be heard?
Yes.
The most important feature that we need to recognize with regards to the religious organization is that the religious organization being exploitative to the individual on the ground. I think this is the most important feature that we need to recognize in this debate. I'm going to talk about this like exploitative feature in two aspects. Firstly, about monetary exploitation, but secondly, political exploitation on the people on the ground. So firstly, about the monetary exploitation, rebuttals are going to be integrated, or the VP is going to be talk about that. So firstly, about the monetary exploitation. What does it mean by the monetary exploitation on our side of the house? We tell you that the rampant monetary exploitation from the religious organization to the believer on the ground does exist in many ways. What does it mean by the exploitation? Firstly, that this religious organization can require frequent donation from the people and massive amounts of money from the people on the ground. They can say, hey, you need to pay, like if you want to subscribe to this religion, you need to pay massive amounts of money if you want to get closer to the gods or something, something like that. And every single religious event, like organization can collectivize money for the sake of, by using rhetoric of saying, hey, this money is something necessary for us to have this religious event. Like if you are the, real believer of that of this religion, you obviously need to pay some money in the first place. Why this monetary exploitation is structurally likely? I have 4 mechanistic reasons. Firstly, because the hierarchical structure within the religious organization does exist. That means that the leader of that religious organization have cult of personality. They are most influential person in the religious believer. That means that the religious believer are likely to believing what the leader says in that organization. But second thing note here is that peer pressure does exist between the religious, religious believer, right? Because the other religious believer pays some money necessarily means that you think, aha, I need to pay some money to religious organization because the, like other peer individual do the same thing in the first place. But third thing note here is that especially for the vulnerable people, they are likely to blindly believe in the religion, and they cannot be critical to what the religious organization or what the religious leader says in the first place. That means it is likely that these people like just choose to pay some money like without thinking about the benefits and harm from taking doing that action. The fourth reason is that as much as the religious organization or the religious leader like collective as money, it goes directly to the pockets of the leader, and they have massive incentive to gain money because they are like just human being. This is true for two reasons. Firstly, because the religious organization or religious individual have capacity to tax exemption. That means that they can sneak the money or the cash flow of these individuals. But second thing note here is that as much as they are being individual, I think it is like natural to claim that these individuals have an incentive to maximize the benefit that they can gain, for the reason that even in the status quo, like even if they do such a exploitative thing, that the believer on the ground just respect these individuals. I don't necessarily think that these leaders have an incentive to be benevolent or to be transparent to the people on the ground. Just talk about the example of this monetary exploitation. Firstly, Robert Tilton in the United States utilizes television to gain money in dirty manner. He's called as the tele-evangelist, and they can collectivize money from the people on the ground. They bought the 2 private jets in cash. But second example is about the South America. Massive amounts of people under the poverty line like subscribe to the religion and pay massive amounts of money to the religion, and religious organizations have massive money, and they can create such a luxury material for the religious organization, but the people on the ground necessarily suffer under that situation. Why is this substantial impactful analysis? Firstly, because the poor people are likely to die on their side of the house. We have organized religion for the reason that they cannot rationally calculate the benefits and harm from having that action. The second thing note here is that even to the middle class individual, they need to sacrifice their disposable income to the full extent for the reason that they need to fully pay some money to the religious organization and contribute themselves in order to show their religious individual on the ground. Why this extension about the monetary exploitation is something really important in meta framework of this debate. We tell you this directly clashes with the opening opposition analysis about donation or whatsoever. But what the opening opposition basically told us is that this religious organization can be function as a social welfare to the poor individual. 3 responses. Firstly, even in a status quo, I don't necessarily think that the religious organization is something effective actor to have social welfare in the first place, for the reason that the religious organization oftentimes do this as just as performance. I don't necessarily think that these individuals thinking about the true effectiveness in the first place. The second thing note here is that they haven't proved why they use this collectivized money in a benevolent manner. I'm going to give you the counter analysis as to why these individuals are likely to run for the private incentive. As I told you, that these individuals, even if they are private profit seeking, these individuals can gain, these individuals still can gain some trust from the citizens on the ground. I don't necessarily think that they have incentive to be benevolent actor in the first place. They need to explain why that religious organization and leader have an incentive to take care for the poor people on the ground. They just do that just as performance in the first place. Second extension is about the political exploitation. Why is that? What does it mean by the political exploitation? We tell you that the religious organization or the religious leader have an capacity to tell who to vote, what kind of political ideology that they need to subscribe to. That means that if you are the certain religious, if you are the member of certain religious community, you have to follow what the religious leader on the top of your head says. Why is this structurally likely? 3 reasons for this. Firstly, because the aggregated level of the believer can be a voting bloc from the perspective of the politician. The second thing note here is that the politician oftentimes need to take care for this voting bloc. But thirdly, we tell you it is easiest way from the perspective of the politician to negotiate with the religious leader and have personal connection between each other. And there should be some trade or deal between the politician and religious leader to say, hey, I need to give.
Under both paradigms, people have the inherent desire to exploit others, even in small community. But this is less likely to expose to the public because its scale is so small. How can you better deal with that kind of desire for the people?
I think individual be desirable for themselves. I think it's totally fine on the other side of the house because they care themselves rather than the religious organization on your side of the house. We tell you this political connection or the political sort of trade between religious organization and politician is something really harmful for the reason that the individual on the ground cannot reflect their own political value to the politics. I think this is something problematic. Let's talk about just example, right? Even if some particular individual wants some abortion, religious organization against that, meaning that you cannot vote against the rights of abortion. I think this is something very, very impactful for a reason that the religious organization deprives the individual choices to engage in the politics. Let's talk about why our extension has conclusively important in this debate. Opening half just talk about most vulnerable minority. What we told you from our side of the house is that the majority of the people who subscribe to the organized religion is something got harmed by this organization. First reason is that I think proud to propose this motion.
Okay, thank you very much for that speech. We'd like to call upon a member of OP to give us their case within 7 minutes here.
POI
聞こえてます。POI の取り方だけ。
Please give us POI via video because I won't probably recognize the chat. Right. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. There are 3 contributions coming from the closing opposition. Number 1, we're going to further extend the embodiment of the God that can be uniquely cultivated throughout the structure of the organized religion. And secondly, we're going to emphasize that why personal belief can be easily compromised, especially under the current circumstances where cancel culture is actually there, or the rise of atheism is actually there. There's a huge threat against the people who have belief, and it's extremely difficult for those people to keep their religion. And there's extremely necessary to refer your ideology with the organization itself. And lastly, I'd like to have the comparison between the government side. That there are so many things that actually claim that the organization religion can be bad, but we think the overall benefit of salvation of the people is much larger. Before that, quick rebuttal against the member government. So member government came up and said 2 things. Firstly, they said the monetary exploitation, like people asking frequent donation, is actually bad. But they actually haven't concluded why fundamentally this donation itself is a bad thing. Because we believe that as long as those individuals believe are feeling that it is okay to donate some money for this religious organization, knowing that they can actually feel much more happy, right? It's actually much more beneficial for those individuals, especially when it comes to the people who are actually having so many troubles in this present life, right? They cannot actually become materially meaningfully better off, even though they can save up some amount of money for those individuals, right? Rather, these people can actually be much more happier when they are feeling secured for the afterlife happiness by actually donating some money for this religious organization. Therefore, people are subscribing to this organization because this is a much more fundamentally better way for those individuals, and we have to respect them. Now, secondly, they talked about politician and religion and abortion ban that's actually triggered by that. Number 1, that as long as there's a clear and the gross damage to some individuals' fundamental human rights, then we can have Supreme Courts to intervene in this situation. For example, in many cases, the Supreme Court intervenes the abolition of the LGBT community in many countries, right? And also that in case of there's like minor trade-off between some group and other group, that this is actually usually happening in the politics. There's no meaningful difference between like having a lobbying or having any other interest group whatsoever. We think this is not a quite meaningful benefits to begin with. Moving on to my first extension. So what opening opposition tried to say was they asserted that there is assurance that people can, when they read the Bible, they can actually feel assured that God may exist. We're going to further extend by actually bringing the concrete analysis that why organization structure itself is extremely necessary for the embodiment of the God. Why is that? Because number one, for example, the structure itself actually provides, for example, the tangible structure that people can actually feel. Even though they believe and they hear the existence of God, they know there's a holy text called Bible, but when they actually feel more instinctively true that when they visit cathedral in the Vatican, they actually saw the magnificent structure of the cathedral that you can never imagine, because this is the moment that they actually feel the existence of God, because the moment there's something greatness about your existence, right? Just because you're actually reading it, theoretically you can actually understand, but it's much more necessary to ensure that there is a certain proof for you to believe in, ladies and gentlemen, because fundamentally there is a point that there is no proof that God exists, and you heard a lot of things that God exists, right? But you actually have to rely on something, you rely on certain subjective feeling that is actually necessary. And also when it comes to religious practice and leader authority, there are two unique contributions they can actually bring. Number one is that there's an authority to interpret the holy text, because these people have been highly educated. They actually graduate from the religious school, religious university. They are the specialized training individual, right? Therefore, the imam or pope or a higher preacher in the Catholic structure, they actually can bring the benefit of giving the holy text. And this is the moment that people can buy into these narratives, because these people can actually get high training. This is an organization that is structurally providing those kind of benefits. And secondly, those leader authority can act as a proxy of the God. For example, giving statue to the deceased individual when you actually, when you have aborted your kid, that you're actually suffering is going to be saved by the God because of the fact that the religious leader is granting religious statue for your deceased unborn children. So, and also the approval of the marriage and those things that an important event in your life is going to be approval, and so on, is going to be seen as a contribution for you to the religious structure that enables you to be happy in the afterlife. This is the moment that you actually crystallize the belief, and this is something that you can rely on, even though there's something may be happening to your life. Second extension, but before that, any POI.
There are massive alternative value that you can subscribe to, including nationalism or idol or anything like that. Just example of Japan. Why do you need to subscribe to the individual religion on our side of the house?
Because nationalism doesn't guarantee your afterlife. The religion and God only ensures that there's an afterlife. There's something more important than the present life. This is a meaningful contribution and exclusive difference when it comes to religion and God. And second extension. And why in the current situation, the people, it's extremely difficult to keep their own belief? Because the people under some counterfactual, right? There will be interpretation is going to be up to the individual. So other people can say, I have different interpretation from you, or when it comes to you actually you have your family die, then you may think that actually it's like a blessing from the God, but other people might say this is actually your family has done something wrong and you actually betrayed the God and things like this, and you can actually feel quite unstable because it's the most difficult time in your life. And also when it comes to the present situation, the SNS, or you can actually have the cancel culture, right? When you share the social story that there are many hundreds of thousands of people actually denying that, and also based on the personal value. And also, for example, atheism, the actively bashing religious individual by the ground of their belief. And then it's important, it's extremely difficult to defend your ideology just because you're just only relying on your personal interpretation. This might not be the perfect, but as long as you have something else that you can believe in as an authority, this is extremely important because you can keep their own ideology. This is massively beneficial. Why is that? Because when it comes to comparison, for example, the government harms like oppression of minority, like religion, also these things, right? The oppression minority is actually reformed because the Pope Francis is actually there, and reform is actually incentivize the people. They want to keep the financial donation coming from the structure. Also, they want to keep their believers, right? So those can be minimized under any circumstances. However, the only unique contribution coming from the other side of the house, the unique salvation for those individuals. Therefore, we oppose.
Okay, thank you for that speech. I would like to call upon Gov to give us their speech within 7 minutes. Here.
マイクついてる。ちょっと待ってね。はい、じゃあ、始めたいと思います。My speech begins in 3, 2, 1. OG identified some clear victims of minority like children and LGBTQ individuals, but we talked about more number of individuals who belong to the entire structure, and we said the entire structure in and of itself is pernicious in terms of controlling individuals' capacity financially and politically to get some salvation, quote unquote, salvation. So I'm going to extend, I'm going to emphasize our extensions first, and then rebuttal to OO, and then rebuttal to CEO. So our extensions are mainly twofold. Firstly, the monetary exploitation, and secondly, the political kind of exploitation, which is probably more important than what the opening proposition has talked about, because simply there are more number of individuals who are not necessarily gay, who are not necessarily that much poor, but at the same time, structures inside the organization are getting pressure so much. We're talking about individuals who belong to the Robert Tilton's televangelist group, and people who are simply exploited in the faith, in the concept of seed faith, in which Robert Tilton tells people to get some seed and plant some seed and get some harvest later in the form of more monetary gain, and trying to get so much amount of money and also so much amount of political kind of lobbying. And that kind of thing allows Robert Tilton to buy 2 private jets in cash, and that is probably the monetary gain. And opening opposition talked about this, like in the form of donation and getting shelter. That's a good thing. Well, it's not that. It's that people must donate that money, despite the fact that it is no longer happy for that individual. And CEO also talked about this. As long as they're happy, that's okay. Well, we're not talking about happy people. We're talking about people who are already unhappy about giving money, but are obliged to continue to do it, because if they don't do so, they don't get any kind of spiritual salvation. They don't get any kind of community support. They're basically abandoned from that community. And the community is extremely good at making those individuals dependent on that community by shutting out connections from those individuals with other people, by encouraging them not to depend so much on family and friends, because that eventually increases the profits for that specific organization. That tactics is very much rampant, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. And secondly, we talked about political exploitation, because literally it's the Catholic community in Texas which block voted for the banning of abortion, and that's probably a very important thing, because after getting back from an election, after getting back from a voting poll, you're asked by those religious people, who did you vote for? And that already is a taking hostage of your entire belief and salvation and the belonging to the entire community, which means that even if you want abortion, even if you want bills that actually helps you as an individual, you're not allowed to do it, because the community is entirely pressurizing upon those individuals. We're not only talking about a small number of children who are sexually abused, we're talking about the vast majority of individuals who just belong to that category of organization. They say organization is good in maintaining that kind of religious belief, but the cost is that you are taking hostage of so many things in life that are critically important in terms of financial gain, and in terms of being able to voice out what you actually want in the political sphere. All of those things are probably more important than simple victims of small number of victims that OG talked about. So, rebuttal to Owo. Owo told you firstly that donation is extremely important. Now, to this, OG rebutted by saying, in the after plan, there will be social expectation for NGOs and so on, which are told by the DLO to be not mutually exclusive, because OG was lazy in characterizing why it is not effective right now at the moment. We, as the closing proposition, did that. Ushiro already told you that religious organizations do not have much incentive to care about the efficacy, care about the reach out of that kind of donations, because firstly, obviously religious organizations are doing it for performance to appeal to the general public and also appeal to the individual believers on the ground, which means that they do not have any capacity or incentive to care about the efficacy of it. And secondly, religious organizations are likely to target people who are likely to be proselytized into that kind of religion after getting donations, which means that they're less likely to reach out for different regions occupied by different religions at the same time. That is why we don't think people in the refugee camps are likely to give some food and all of those necessary goods to the Muslim individuals who they really hate. That kind of a structure already exists, and we don't think even at the moment this donation stuff is much more effective. And note again that the problem of donation is that we must donate money even if those believers do not really want to, and that pressurization is unrebutted from their side of the house, aside from the simple claim that they are happy, which is probably not true. And going on to the another argument from opening opposition that says, spiritual salvation is very important, further extended by closing opposition by mentioning the context kind of stuff. And they told you firstly that people are weak and people can't believe in God by themselves. Well, firstly, this is an assertion. It is quite possible that people get into the dilemma because of the existence of that religion. We already talked about it from opening proposition when they talked about some LGBT kids, for example, that those people are in dilemma of belief because of the existence of that religion. And we don't think religion necessarily helps individuals to strengthen their own ideologies and religious beliefs. So secondly, we have more chance of getting stronger belief because they are the ones who chose it, not imposed upon them from the very childhood. We understand that they can conduct some education, but when you grow older, you're more likely to question that kind of belief because those are the things you didn't necessarily scrutinize. Those are the things you didn't necessarily actively chose as an individual. I'll take a POI now.
Even in smaller scale communities such as family or like a corporation, the exploitative structure or hierarchy actually exists, and similar incentive to exploit actually exists.
I'm getting there. Okay, wait for it. So then they talked about this, yeah. So other people, bad people do exist, but the thing is, when it comes to like family and other communities, other mechanisms to prevent that kind of structural violence and discrimination actually exist. There's the existence of police officers who probably are more likely to investigate into one family rather than the big corporate, big organizations, big leader. And also there's a cult of public opinion. But secondly, crucially, the existence of religious communities and religious organizations hinders the workability of those other mechanisms like police and like the court of public opinion, because they are pious believers who are protecting those religious structure on Twitter and Facebook, who are denying that kind of things from happening. And those people are forced to do it and pressurized to do it in order to protect the fame of the entire structure, in order to protect their own belief and their own salvation. Again, they are taken hostage of, right? Which means that the political manipulation is more likely to happen. Those people are probably not believing in any Twitter article that revealed the existence of that kind of violence, sexual violence happening in there. And probably we are the ones who are more likely to have that kind of things corrected. And friends are extremely useful. Like, look at the example in Japan. We don't have that much organized structure of religion, but we do have friends and communities, and no one probably wants that much that concept of afterlife to begin with. That entire structural difference between after plan and current situation is entirely missed, which is why we are taking this debate.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Please, okay, thank you very much. I would like to call upon Op-Whip to conclude this round of debate within 7 minutes here.
Okay. Can you hear me? I think so. Okay. So my speech starts 3, 2, 1. Government side is brave enough to admit that people have moments of despair or fear of the damnation, but unfortunately they don't have enough counterfactual analysis to how after taking this proposal people will be saved. Because as government we've had to admit it, maybe this is good for the non-religious people, maybe fine with religious people. We are talking about religious people who have been massive fear for the eternal damnation after the life. or massive despair moment of the life itself. And we say, we need to save them, but they can never. And we say, all of the analysis that they bring to us by coming from the religious structure is kind of nothing. That's why we won. So I'm going to talk about two things in my speech. First, I'm going to analyze religion versus society. And secondly, I'm going to talk about all of the rebuttal to the entire government case. So I'm going to talk about the firstly, religion versus society. So we say they are enough, okay? People have sad moment and society will save them. No, because my partner have already crystallized that there's must be social sanction to pre-existence like weak positions, like cancel culture or atheists who actively denounce those kind of individual beliefs or amount desire to to criticize weak position people. Then Kusaka said friend will take care, corporation people take care. No, not everybody is like that. Okay, not everybody is fulfilled by mutual understanding of the friends, and we are targeting those of the people those people can't save. And also we say unique incentive of the religion it's based on the non-material fulfillment and psychological psychological savior of the someone. So we say those structure or hierarchy to form the collective identity to support that is inherently incentivizes those religion to structurally support those of them. Unlike corporations, just like example the Japanese traditional advertising company bully poor women to die. All right. This is just bad, but just will never happen in religion. This my partner already talked about because authority to check, and also there's like internal discussion between each individual slightly different beliefs, and those check and balance system is unique benefit to the religion. That's why we already won. And after taking this proposal, what will happen? Okay, because individual can't believe structure their own belief. If you think about the Quran or the Islamic or it's a Christian Bible, you can't transcribe properly, okay? Because each of the things are just story, and how to properly transcribe this and how to properly apply it to each of your moment of the despair of each of the different life. It's the most important thing to applicate to your life and to make it your savior. In order to do that, my partner told you, educational institution. In short, leaders, it's a very necessity. Yes. Yes.
Which one? OG is also raising.
OG. Open.
So due to the transcription and due to the translation of the Bible and what God has said, there are some conservatives justified to their own discrimination against minority or the women or the sexual minority whatsoever. How that structural and harm doesn't happen on your side of the house.
I'm going to talk about in the second criterion. So, first criterion, I already shown, religion is uniquely beneficial and society just bring you to die. So this is good. So secondly, I'm going to review, what government has said is just nonsense. So as point of the information that you see, I think, is that, religion is very bad. Firstly, very basic, refute is, this is kind of offensive, okay? There's no inherent reason why religion can be discriminated. Most of the religion don't have, harassment of women or harassment of each kind of identity. So they just, kind of accept some of the religion. Then also we say hierarchy to check and balance exists. Why? Because, if you see the structure as my partner talked about, this local committee and local leader is formed, local leader is, elected by the local participants, and those local leaders gather together to both, unite leaders. And we say, in terms of this electoral system, we say that enough check and balance system. Then question becomes, how does check and balance system incentivized? Okay, unlike usual society, as I said, this is for the structural fulfillment of your soul. So we say you can't do anything bad to the some particular identity because media told you, of course, media bashes. If Pope Francis actually reformed the structure after the child molesting cases, they what he has done is they set the camera, they have international discussions, they had check the annual kind of the check and balance by auditing each of the kind of gathering. We say those kind of things is great. We also say incentive. Core incentives of religion is to spread those kind of identity and spread the structural fulfillment of each others. So they simply can't do something it's against against the society. Because if you do so, you must be criticized by those by electoral process or media itself, or you can simply gather people. So that's why they can maybe there's a problem, but those kind of things they have told is already reformed. So they already shown that, how those reform exists by showing the example. And then they said, women in spirit. No, there's no inherent meaning for that. And secondly, we say Uganda cases or Saudi Arabia cases. Firstly, Uganda is, as I already admitted, it's coming to the political dynamics. In Saudi Arabia cases, it's kind of the tribe ideology. And, the important difference here is after taking disposal, how this will be changed, okay? After taking disposal, since it's root concept coming from the ethnic ideology or political dynamics, they will just change the reason to the ethnic ideology or something. That's why, it will never change. Also, we say, if that exists, who saves them, okay? If that exists, religion can't save them after taking disposal. So we say, savior exists, it's good. And also, we are more than happy to introduce microfinance system, as, some African nations is doing, or, increasing UN women support. So we say this is not unique. And also, Kusaka and member of the government talked about money is stolen or political exploitation. Firstly, money is stolen, but more than a certain scale, you have, balance sheet or receipts to, checked by government. So, those kind of, huge steal kind of things, illegal things doesn't happen. Secondly, if that's not illegal, then it's, consented. As Kusaka admitted, we know, some people buy banks. They choose and they allow it, believer allow it, because maybe, it's something proud of. And if you are something proud of, then it's good. Because, you need to be probably sacrifice some of your part. And by definition, sacrificing your property, giving away your property is inherently connected to your happiness to, fill the gap. So we say this is benefit for people who choose. Then they said, it's for enforcement. You can convert any time. And coercion process is kind of smashed from the entire government side. So we say this is enough just refutation. Then political exploitation, simply voting is independent. It's not checked by others. So it's not. And if you choose, it's good. So we say simply we win. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for an awesome round of debate. Judges, please move to individual deliberation. We're going to. Okay, thank you.